You know the drill, let's do it. Hello fellow mushroom people and welcome to today's video. So it's finally time for a wrap up. I didn't do a wrap up in May and June, mostly because I wasn't really reading anything. So all the books that I finished in those 2 months, I talked about in other videos. So you didn't miss out on anything. And I was reading during that period of time. I just wasn't finishing anything. And that's why I had nothing to talk about. But I finished some books in July, and that's why I have something to talk about now. So I thought about going through the books, not chronologically, but more like by age demographic, because I read a few middle grade books, a few about YA books, and then I read a few adult books. And I want to start with the middle grade, but I will put it in timestamps so you can switch between all the books that I read, if you don't care about one or just care about one book in particular. But yeah. So the first book that I read is Dragon Pearl by Yoon. So this is a kind of science fantasy middle grade book, which has this Rick Riordan Presents sticker on the front cover, so that maybe people will buy those. The book is about a girl named Min. She's 13 years old and she's a fox spirit. And she lives with her family on this kind of desert-like planet in what in my mind was the Outer Rim from Star Wars. So she kind of lives on Tatooine. So one day an investigator comes to their house and tells them that her brother, who joined the Space Forces a few years ago, that he went missing, and they think that he deserted. Because apparently he was going to look for the Dragon Pearl, which is an object that can terraform whole planets and make them more livable. So Min decides to follow her brother, or rather leave her home and go search for her brother. I started this book not really expecting much. I was looking forward to a spacey adventure story, because I kind of was in a Star Wars mood. I don't know, I was a very mood-changing month for me. But yeah, I got that in the first 100 pages and it was really hype because it was so fun reading those first 100 pages. And then it went more the military science fiction route, which I don't really mind military science fiction, but it was not what I was hoping to get from the story. So for me that was kind of a bummer. So the part of the story was still interesting and I still wanted to know what was going on with her brother and stuff. But it was like, can we go back to adventuring now? Yeah, so that was kind of not that great. So I didn't like how the story progressed. But I enjoyed that the main character was a shapeshifter. I think that was one very cool aspect. Also, like I said, it's more science fantasy, so you get the science fiction elements with space travel and space forces and stuff like that. But there's also fantasy in the mix, because you don't only have humans in this world, but there's, so Min is a fox spirit, and then there's dragons and tigers and goblins, and they're all part of this world. And also space travel is kind of magic fueled, or engineering is a bit magically, so that was a really, really interesting concept, and I really liked the world in general, which is why I want to pick up the second book in the series, which is coming out I think later this year or in the beginning of next year, because the way the book ended, it kind of feels like I could get my space adventure from the second book in the series. And I liked it enough to give it another shot, and hopefully it will go in the direction that I wish this book had fully embraced. But it was still a fun read, and if you're looking for a science fantasy adventure which is very short and not that thought-provoking. I would recommend this book. So I think after Dragon Pearl, I was still in the mood for some middle grade, and I picked up Shipwreck Island by Struan Murray. This is the second book in the Orphans of the Tide series. I read Orphans of the Tide in March, I think, and it was very, very good. Which is why I picked up this book immediately, and then I never read it. So I was like, let's just read it, let's get it over with. And this was my favorite book of the month. So this book was so good. I don't really want to talk about what's going on in the book because it kind of spoils the ending of the first book. But Orphans of the Tide, so the first book in the series, is about Ellie, a girl who lives in this city which is drowning. So the world has drowned and everything's underwater except for the city. And in the city they are very afraid of a certain entity called the Enemy, which manifests inside a human vessel to come out and wreak havoc. And one day a whale stranded on their island, and out of the whale comes a boy, and everyone in the city thinks that this boy is the Enemy. So Ellie saves the boy, and then things go on from there. And I really like the world, I really like the characters, the book was fun, it was fast-paced, and it was a very good read. So the second book picks up where the first book left off, and I like this one even more than the first one. I was so in love with this book. It was so fun. It was so great. The characters were interesting. I was surprised by the twists and turns that were happening. And it wasn't... So sometimes you read a book and you're like, yeah, this is good for a middle grade. This one's just good. It's great. It's just a good book. And I just recommend this series, and I hope that the third one in the series, which is coming out in 2022, I think, that this one's even better, or that it concludes the series in a satisfying way, and I think it will, just because this one was a step up from the first book, and I can only recommend it. So for all people who like fantasy books, I think you would like this book as well. The only issues I had with this book were like sometimes the characters were acting a bit young, which is to be expected. They're children, so I think they're like 12 to 13 years old or something like that. And why wouldn't they act like children? Also, so this is a 400-page book, but there's not that much on each page. So there's not that much content, and sometimes things would move a bit fast. But I didn't really mind that. So it's just very nitpicky, and I still enjoyed this book. I liked it so much, and now I'm really looking forward to the final book in the trilogy. And I just hope that it's going to be great, and I think it will. I have the feeling that this is going to be one of my favorite series of all time. I really hope it will be. So that's it for the middle grade books. Let's move on to YA. So the first YA book that I read in July is Hani and Ishu's Guide to Fake Dating by Adiba Jaigirdar. So this book is about a fake relationship between two girls, and it was fun. It was a cute romance. It wasn't that believable at times, because I don't think fake romances are ever believable. And in this book, so the book starts with Hani. She confesses to her friends that she's bisexual, and her friends are like, no, we don't believe you, which is a very shitty move. But then she makes up her relationship to Ishu, who, like Hani, has Bengali parents, and that's why everyone at school just assumes that they are friends for some reason. And Ishu, on the other hand, is a top student at class, and she just wants to get good grades and then leave school and go to university to study medicine. So for her, there's no reason to start this fake dating. But then Ishu's sister comes home to her parents and she's like, oh, I stopped studying medicine. And they're like, what the hell? And then her parents are like, Ishu, you can't disappoint us. You have to become head girl, which I think is something very... a prestigious position you can get in school, I guess. So Ishu wants to become head girl, but she isn't very popular at school. And then she agrees to this fake dating thing. And it's very convoluted, and I'm sorry I had to tell you all of this. But anyways, they start their fake dating, and surprise, surprise, they fall for each other. I mean, has that ever not happened in a fake dating story? I don't think so. So, yeah, I think their actual falling in love relationship thing was really cute. So I like both of those characters. So Hani is more of the normal girl that you would meet around. So she spends time with her friends, does stuff, but she's also into religion. So her religion is very important for her, which I think was a very cool twist. Ishu, on the other hand, she's a very foul-mouthed young woman, and I really liked her character. And I think they were kind of cute together, and that's why I liked the story overall. I had some issue with Hani's friends because they were the worst people ever. And I was always like, oh, don't just go back to them. They're horrible. But I guess when you're young, you just want to fit in. And I can understand why Hani put up with all the things her friends said. But they were horrible. Those people, you shouldn't hang out with them. Overall, I think the story was very enjoyable. I don't think it was anything spectacular. But I liked it. I didn't have any quarrels with it. I don't regret spending time on the story. It was a cute romance, and I think that was what I was in the mood for at the time, and that's what I got. So the second YA book that I read in July is Aetherbound by E.K. Johnston. This is another science fiction story. I was really in the science fiction mood. I think I read this before I read Dragon Pearl, and I just wanted something else to... Because this one's also a very short book, and I was done with this in no time, and I just needed more science fiction at the time. So the story is about a young girl called Pent Harland, who grew up on this generation ship, which is a long haul ship. So it takes things from one space station through the whole universe, basically, to another space station, which takes them decades, so a very long time. So she's never left the ship. But since she doesn't really have the skills to operate the ship, she isn't that well liked. And on this ship, everyone has to earn their oxygen and their calories because they're very short on both of those things. So her life is crappy. And I was feeling for her because I always thought, oh no, the poor girl, you have to get out of that. And that's what she does. So at one point when they dock onto this specific space station, she sneaks off the ship and meets two boys who are the ruling family of this space station. And that's where things get interesting because they come up with a plan. Okay, so there were many things going on in the book and they were kind of complicated. But basically, Pent, the girl, belongs to the ship until she turns 18. And her way out of this is to marry, because when she marries, she doesn't belong to her old family anymore, but to a new family. So she decides to marry one of those boys who is the one with the family gene who can operate the space station. And then they plan to impregnate her so that she has his genes in her body via her child that she's carrying, so that she can take over the space station and he can leave and do other things, because there's always one person of this family needed a man to operate the space station. Yeah, it's kind of convoluted. But she agrees, they make up a plan, and then they do things. I liked the story. I thought it was very, very interesting. I think in the beginning it was very clinical and very serial. So like I said, the people, there's also a content warning in the beginning of the book where they say that there's medical violence and characters obsess about food and counting calories, and that's totally true. So on the ship you only get that much calories that you need for doing the things you're supposed to do, and that's why once Pent gets off the ship and she's on the space station and she can eat all the other things that she never could and eat for pleasure rather than just filling up calories, it's a nice thing for her. But I also think in this book there's so much going on. It's only like 240 pages long, and there's a whole background story for the universe. Then there's a rebellion going on in the background, and then there's the stuff with Pent. And I got the feeling that it was a bit too much for such a short book, and that the relationships between the characters also suffered because of that. And I really like the characters. I think Pent was a great character. I think the brothers, I think they're called Ned and Fisher, I think they were very interesting as well. And I really liked seeing them together because they were very friendly with each other, and I thought they made a kind of nice family, or like found family thing. But I just wished that we could have spent more time with them and not just kind of rush through the story, which I thought was kind of unfortunate. So overall, I enjoyed this book. I thought it was a good book, and I liked this found family aspect very much. But I also wished that it would have been longer. There would have been so much more space to explore the things going on in this book. And so the epilogue of the story teases a sequel because there's a whole new character introduced suddenly, and I think that in the sequel that I assume we'll get will focus more on the rebellion aspect that was hinted at in this book, which I think, why not make this longer and focus on the characters that are in this book more? I like this book. I just think it could have been even better if it had been longer. That's all I want to say. So let's move on to the adult books. I got the feeling I've been already talking for like 10 hours. So the first adult story that I read is a novella, and that one is The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nghi. The story is about a person, I think they come from a monastery and they journey around the land to collect stories. So the story picks up when they come across an old lady at a lake who tells them the story about the Empress of Salt and Fortune because the old lady was an acquaintance to the Empress. I really enjoyed the story. I think it was one of the better novellas that I've read since I kind of started reading novellas. Because in the other novellas I always got the feeling that they were too short to actually tell a full story or a satisfying story that was not that formulaic. And I think in that story I got a full story that was good and that was enjoyable and that had all the things in the right place. So I really liked the story about the Empress of Salt and Fortune in the book The Empress of Salt and Fortune. I already bought the sequel to the book When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain, which takes place in the same universe, and it's about the same collector of stories when they go to another place and get told another story. And I think that's a great idea because you can have different stories, but you always have your one character who is prominent in all the books. And I recommend the story if you are interested in... it's kind of fairy tale-ish, I think, but in a good way. So after I was done with this book, I picked up Fireheart Tiger by Aliette de Bodard, which is another novella, like 100 pages long. And so this was described as a Ghibli-esque book, and I didn't feel like it was Ghibli-esque at all. The book Fireheart Tiger is about a princess who lived her life as a hostage in another palace, and then she came back to her country, and after a while the princes from the other country where she was held hostage come and visit her country to negotiate certain things. And those two had a love affair going on while she was at the other place. Also, the other place burned down while she was there, and that was traumatic and stuff like that. So, oh god, I'm bad at explaining stories. But anyways, she is in her palace now, and they start their love affair again. I didn't really like the story. I think it was kind of rushed. I mean, yeah, it's only 100 pages long, but I got the feeling that the Empress of Salt and Fortune, which I also read, made more use of the little space that it had. And in Fireheart Tiger, I got the feeling that things were developing way too quick and way too fast, and that it didn't really fit together. Also, characters were behaving in a way that I didn't feel made much sense. And I also didn't feel this Ghibli-esque thing that was promised on the cover. So Fireheart Tiger was more of a miss for me. I finished it, but unfortunately I didn't get that much enjoyment out of it. So now let's move on to the novels I read. The first one I already talked about in length, and that one is The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. I have a very long review talking about this book because for me it was a kind of complicated thing. That's why I don't want to go into much depth. I think this is a great book. I just didn't enjoy it that much. And I'll leave it at that. If you are interested in knowing more about what I think about this book, you can check out the review that I made. But yeah, I think it is worth checking out. So the final book that I read in July, which I read on my Kindle and on audio, is Blackwater's Sister by Zen Cho. This book is about a young woman who moves with her family from America to Malaysia, where they originated from, and there she gets haunted by the spirit of her late grandmother, and then she kind of enters this world of gods and spirits, and things go on from there. So I really enjoyed this book. This was a great book. I really liked this book. So the main character, Jess, she grew up in America and she went to university there, and due to some circumstances her parents decided to go back to Malaysia, where she didn't really grow up, so it's kind of a new world for her. I think this one was so well done. So, as you know, I'm from Germany, and we mostly get stories that take place in global north. So most of the stories that I consumed in my life took place in America or Germany or Europe, somewhere. So it was so good to see a book that doesn't take place in any of those countries, even if it is inspired by other cultures and takes things from those cultures and puts them in the story. Because being in Malaysia in the story, it made the book so different from all the other books that I usually read. I like the way the people talked. It was so cool to see. The audiobook was great, so I can recommend the audiobook. It was very well done. The ghosts and the gods, they felt so cool. It was just very, very interesting, and I got the feeling that I was entering a different culture, and that's what I always want to feel like when I read a certain book. Yeah, there's also a sapphic romance going on, but it's more in the background because it's a long distance relationship, and so we also get to see the hardships that Jess has to deal with. On the one hand, she has all the spirit and god stuff going on, and on the other hand, she has her girlfriend who's very far away, and her parents don't know about her, and it's also so there's much conflict going on there. But in the end, it was such a good book, and I think I want to pick up some other books by the author, because I just thought that this one was so well done, and now I'm excited to see what else she has written and how those books, if they also feel kind of similar to this one and if they have the same vibe. But yeah, Blackwater Sister is, so it's a recommendation, and I would urge everyone to pick it up if you're in the mood for something that's not America. So that wraps up my July wrap-up. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've read any of those books, feel free to leave a comment and tell me how you liked them, or if you're planning to read any of them. So yeah, I'm looking forward to any conversation. So see you again next time.